Hi there, everyone, and welcome to the Daily Gardener. And thank you so much for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and it is March 5th, and there are just 15 days until the first day of spring. Today, we celebrate the woman who donated her entire orchid collection to begin the Belle Isle Conservatory in Detroit. We'll also learn about a woman who Burpee honored with the naming of a marigold. We'll hear an excerpt from a garden diary for this week of March. And we grow that garden library today with a very delightful book that teaches how to make your own floral cocktails. And then we'll wrap things up with a little story that features 5 favorite perennials for country life. But first, here's just a quick reminder that today is Friday, and later today, the Daily Gardener Friday newsletter will be going out. This newsletter is like a little garden note from me to you, and it's not too late to sign up. So all you need to do is head on over to thedailygardener.org, and you can subscribe today, and it'll be in your inbox by this evening. It'll have enough botanical, history, and literature to get you through the weekend. Plus, every week, one lucky subscriber wins a book from the Grow That Garden Library bookshelf. Here's today's curated news. Today's curated news was written by Molly Williams over at Apartment Therapy. And the article that Molly wrote is called 4 Things You Can Plant in March, the very beginning of outdoor gardening season. You know, this is a question that I get all the time. What can I start planting? What are the first things that can go in the garden when it's still relatively cold out? Or things that you may want to consider winter sowing. Now, of course, you're going to want to look at regional information for your growing zone. Check what it says in the seed catalogs or on the back of your seed packets. All of those things will contain information on when it's acceptable for you to start growing that particular item. And remember, it's all about the soil temperature, even more than the air temperature, because the soil has to be thawed. The ground has to thaw in order for your plants to grow. So if you're in an area where that's happened, you can begin to start planting already in March. But for the rest of us, like myself up here in zone 4A in Minnesota, I'll be waiting until later in May to begin sowing directly outdoors, unless I'm winter sowing, in which case I can get a little head start on the season. In any case, this article from Apartment Therapy does a good job of walking you through the 4 types of things you can consider planting first. So first on the list is early, cool-loving annuals. And in this instance, there's no doubt that pansies steal the show. You know, in addition to your spring flowering bulbs, pansies can handle the cool weather. So this is where, if I was going to buy my mom an outdoor container for Mother's Day, it would probably be a lovely bowl of pansies, because I know that they will probably be able to handle anything that a Minnesota May can dish out. Pansies are a sure thing. And that's exactly why I gave my mom a beautiful spring grow container of spring flowering bulbs for Valentine's Day, because it was so cold on Valentine's Day. And the last thing I wanted to do was send her fresh cut flowers when it's like negative 30 degrees outside. It's really hard on the flowers, not to mention the florists. So I wanted to make their job easy. And this year I gave my mom some spring flowering bulbs. I think it's called a Watch Them Grow container. And then that way she could just experience the joy of that. In fact, they're still blooming. They're still coming up. And she was going to send me a picture of her container later today. So if she hasn't done that yet, I'm going to send her a reminder. But it's fun to watch them grow. So the second type of thing that you can plant early in March is trees and shrubs once the ground has thawed. So if the ground has thawed in your area in early spring, Trees and shrubs can be not only planted, but also moved around with the least amount of stress because cooler temperatures are a great time to get those things in the ground. Now, we do say, people in horticulture do say that the best time to plant trees is in the fall. But if you can't do that, then the second best time is in the spring. Now, the same thing goes for berries. That was another thing that apartment therapy mentioned. And I will say that I did talk to a gardener, an avid extension agent, who was convinced that the best time to plant strawberries was actually in the fall, but he couldn't get anyone to go for it. And usually by the time fall rolls around, it can be hard to source strawberry plants. So I can see where it's hard to get people to adapt to that advice. But nonetheless, spring is a wonderful time to plant berries. And one of my favorite berries to plant are blueberries because they give you 4 seasonal interest. You have the beautiful spring flowers. They're adorable. Then you get wonderful summer berries and beautiful fall foliage. And they're also attractive in the winter. So I love their suggestion of berries. And then finally, the last thing on the list is cool season vegetables. Now, of course, here we're talking about things like lettuce or kale, things that can tolerate the cold, just like the pansies can. And I'm telling you, there is something to harvesting spring lettuce, especially when it's still cold outside. Nice cold lettuce, just like you got it out of the crisper in your refrigerator. Actually, I think it's even better than that. So you've got to try it. Well, in any case, if you would like to check out this article from Apartment Therapy, because they give you way more advice than what I just covered here, it is so easy for you to track this thing down if you're in the Facebook group for the show, because all you're going to need to do is type in the word March, and this post will pop right up. Now, if you're not in the Facebook group, don't sweat it. It is so easy to join. All you need to do is search for the words Daily Gardener Community, where you'd search for a friend, and then request to join. I'd love to meet you in the group. It's time for today's botanical history. Here's botanical history for March 5th. Today is the birthday of Anna Scripps Whitcomb, who was born on this day, March 5th, in 1866. Anna was born to James and Harriet Scripps. Her father was an entrepreneur. He founded the Detroit News, and he helped found the Detroit Museum of Art. In 1891, Anna married Edgar Whitcomb, and together they raised 2 children. The couple lived on a beautiful estate in Grosse Pointe, and along the way, Anna nurtured her passion for orchids. The Whitcomb property boasted 2 large greenhouses, which were largely devoted to orchids. During the first half of the 1900s, orchids were still very challenging to grow, and they had a very poor germination rate. Anna's success with orchids was in large part thanks to her longtime gardener and propagator, William Crichton, who worked for Anna for almost 30 years. William often had the help of a small staff of gardeners, and the team worked together to show many of Anna's orchids at the Detroit Flower Show. Now, I thought you would enjoy hearing a little excerpt from a garden article that I read that featured Anna's gardener, William, in the way that he bred Anna's orchids. Check this out. With a fine brush, William transfers the pollen of one gorgeous flower to another. The seed pod of the fertilized flower would contain 250,000 seeds, a few 100,000 of which would be planted, and half of them would bloom 9 years after spring. Because the modern orchid grower studies the ancestry of his plants, William can predict their possible forms and colorings and qualities, but exactly what will happen, William must wait 9 years to learn. Until recently, the orchid breeder could count upon no more than 5% of the selected seeds surviving to germinate. Now, the famous Cornell University method has raised the life expectancy of the orchid seeds to 50%. With this method, seeds are sown in a propagating jelly, which looks like library paste. It's composed of chemicals, salts, and nutrients, and it's made from seaweed. Each year, William will cross but one, possibly two pair. William will save perhaps 10,000 to 20,000 seeds and plant half of them. And just 5 flasks filled with Cornell jelly are sufficient to fill a small orchid house with bloom. And each flask is corked with cotton and covered with a glass and holds between 500 to 1,000 seeds, fine as stardust. In 10 months, flecks of green appear on the thick white gelatin within the flask. Minute seedlings are ready for the outside world, where 8 or 9 years more they must face the hazards of life. Drafts, germs, insects, diseases, changes in temperature, and careless hands could destroy them. Little pots filled with a special orchid moss known as osmundia fiber are prepared. The grower transfers the bits of green, washing off the jelly, scattering the thousands of seedlings like chopped parsley over the smooth, spongy surface of the moss. Years pass, and the infant plants are moved from the nursery to less crowded quarters. Weak individuals are discarded, but each survivor stands alone in a pot, guarded, sprayed, scrubbed with soap, watered and fed by day and by night in controlled degrees of heat and humidity. Well, isn't that a fascinating account of 1950s orchid breeding? Amazing. Now, before Anna died, she made arrangements for her orchid collection. She was very deliberate about this. And in April of 1953, Anna's entire orchid collection, all 600 of them, went to the Belle Isle Conservatory, owned by the city of Detroit. Built in 1904, the domed conservatory had gradually deteriorated. Without Anna's gift and the commitment of $450,000 to renovate and improve the wooden structure with aluminum beams, the 50-year-old glass-domed building would have likely met its end. The very month that Anna's orchids were gifted, the conservatory was renamed as the Anna Scripps Whitcomb Conservatory. Well, today, Anna's Conservatory is the oldest continually running conservatory in the United States, and most people just call it the Belle Isle Conservatory. And it was on this day, March 5th in 2012, that the Akron Beacon Journal shared a story about some of the wealthiest women in Akron, Ohio during the Victorian era. One of the women profiled was the gardener, composer, songwriter, and philanthropist Idabelle Firestone. Well, as you might have suspected, Idabelle was the wife of the rubber baron Harvey Firestone. And in 1929, Idabelle generously started the Idabelle Firestone School of Nursing at Akron City Hospital with a founding donation of $400,000. A lover of gardens and gardening, David Burpee of Burpee Seed fame even named a marigold in Idabelle's honor. And Idabelle was musical. She incorporated gardens and nature into her musical compositions. Ida even wrote a song called In My Garden, which starts out with someone missing their sweetheart and then ends with this verse. A garden sweet, a garden small, where rambler roses creep along the wall, where dainty phlox and columbine are nodding to the trumpet vine. And now each flower is sweeter, dear. I know it's just because at last you're here. Idabelle was a one-of-a-kind woman, and a reporter once wrote, Idabelle Firestone doesn't need a grand mansion to be a lady. She'd be a lady in a shack. It's time for Unearthed Words. Today's Unearthed Words were written by Mrs. Frances King, the pen name for Louisa Boyd Yeomans King, from her book, The Flower Garden, Day by Day. It was a little published diary, and here were her entries for March 1st and 2nd. March is the watching month, the month in which to watch the ground for the bright spears of green of daffodil and iris, and for bloom of species tulips, for the snowdrop, the earliest crocus, the color in the stem of the shrub and tree. And the first injunction for every month of the year should really be this: keep a garden notebook. And if this has not been started in January, then this is the time to buy the book and make the first entries. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Floral Cocktails by Lottie Muir. This book came out in 2019, and the subtitle is 40 Fragrant and Flavorful Flower-Powered Drinks. In this book, Lottie helps us learn to take flowers from the edge of the glass as a garnish and make them the star of the show, the main focus for gorgeous and flavorful libations and beverages. Lottie's recipes include a heady honeysuckle syrup, a fabulous raspberry and scented geranium drink, a lavender gin, a nasturtium rum, a gorse flower syrup, and a rose petal vodka, just to name a few. And Lottie was the perfect author for this book because she's the creator of a pop-up called The Midnight Apothecary, a unique cocktail bar set in a roof garden in London. Lottie's creativity with flowers has evolved into glorious cocktail creations for gardeners and mixologists. This book is 64 pages of plant-powered cocktails created to delight your senses and feature your favorite blossoms from your own home garden. You can get a copy of Floral Cocktails by Lottie Muir and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $5. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. It was on this day, March 5th in 2017, that the Herald Palladium out of St. Joseph, Michigan, shared an article called Flowers for the Country Border by Maureen Gilmore. In this article, Maureen shares a glimpse of farm life, a busy lifestyle where Maureen says, with all the chores to do, few have time to sweat the details, seek perfection, or create glossy magazine looks. And so the perennials that make it on the farm are tough and dependable and require little fuss. Reminds me of my grandma's farm. As Maureen says, in early farms and ranches, the perennials were the stalwart wildflowers of range and prairie. Planted from gathered seeds or roots transplanted to the yard from wild stands, these big, bold perennials took hold and flourished. They have proven to take the worst conditions and survive to bring color, wildlife, and flavor without toxicity to pets, livestock, or kids. Next, Maureen recommends 5 of her favorite perennials for country life. And I thought you'd get a kick out of these, so I'm going to list them and then share a little excerpt. First on the list is bee balm. Maureen says, bee balm is a vigorous North American native perennial. In the colonies, its foliage was an alternative to boycotted tea after the Boston Tea Party. Second on her list is blanket flower. Gaillardia grows low and dense, producing flowers heavily, and then self-sows for many new volunteers next year. Generally, the species is not as picky about soil quality for success. Third on her list is the purple coneflower. Coneflower is best known as a supplement, but this is the finest native for borders. Next on the list is the Shasta hybrid. This plant is a curious hybrid invented a century ago by Luther Burbank. Snow white flowers of the original have many size variations, with the original proving as long-lived and resilient as many natives. And I can relate to this. I actually got my Shasta hybrid off of a farm. And once I did that, I could not believe how wonderfully it reseeds. And before I did that, I was getting my Shasta hybrids from nurseries, and they were just not as resilient. So I was really glad to have gotten mine direct from a farm. Finally, last on Maureen's list is fennel. This popular kitchen garden herb produces tall plants with umbelliferous flower heads. And if you don't know what umbelliferous means, it just means that those flower heads resemble an umbel, or think of an umbrella, or a little pom-pom. And Maureen reminds us that these plants fill the air with delicate forms that last late into the winter. The plants will flourish so they grow together in a dense mass. And this blocks sunlight to the soil beneath, so weeds are less likely to sprout. Win-win. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener, and remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. Hey, thanks for spending another week with The Daily Gardener. If you worry you'll miss your daily dose of botanical brevities, just head on over to thedailygardener.org. That's where you can find all the stories and books that I share on the show. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for my free Friday newsletter. It has lots of goodies in it, and I try to make the newsletter like you're getting a marvelous letter from a garden friend. You can always find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media. You can follow the show on Twitter, where I'm at Gardener Podcast, and you have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for listeners of the show. Just search for Daily Gardener Community the next time you're on Facebook and request to join. Last but not least, if you haven't already done so, go ahead and leave a review for the show over at Podchaser. I so appreciate reviews. The Daily Gardener is produced in lovely Maple Grove in Wyoming, Minnesota, with the help of Paige Mance, Brooke Bierbaum, and Eric Begay. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and as always, have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you on Monday.